Standing Committee on the Environment and Economics. We're glad you're all here. My name is Stuart, and I am from a European heritage. I'd like to recognize and acknowledge that the province of BC exists on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of over 200 distinct Indigenous nations. I am presenting from Skyanu lands, now known as Langford Highlands. On this province-wide call, we would like to recognize all BC First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have cared for these lands and waters since time immemorial. The Forest Hall platform. As this is a truth-based consensus-seeking platform, we are pleased to understand that the overwhelming vast majority of people in attendance understand that climate change is real and that there are extremely harsh mass extinction and ecologically destructive events occurring right now. Having identified the problem, urgency, and harms, we save those topics for a debate setting. This is Forest Hall, an event based on knowledge sharing from experts to BC's elected officials so as to inform policymakers with their decades of effort in BC's forests and their life's work. So please, it is a time to listen and learn. The chair expects all participants to remain muted throughout the duration of this presentation. If there are any interruptions, they will be removed immediately. Thank you. Now, with that being said, the chat function is open and questions written in chat will be selected and will be asked by the organizers to the experts on behalf of the audience. Please start with your name and affiliation and then your question typed into the chat for the end of the presentation. SCOEE was founded in the 90s with one of the intentions to bring together unionized forestry workers and environmentalists during the War of the Woods era. I'd like to recognize the many environmentalists that have worked so hard to keep SCOEE alive for over 30 years doing these good works and help provide us this platform tonight. So all the admin aside, I'm very grateful that tonight's experts who are here giving their time freely, Klay Tindall and Lori Davies, will share their perspectives, views, and expertise on BC's forests here at Forest Hall tonight. So without further ado, please, Klay, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Stuart. Hopefully everyone can hear me. My name is Klay Tindall. I'll give you a bit of background. So I'm the general manager of forestry for the Lil'wat Forestry Ventures in Mount Currie, BC. For those of you that don't know where Mount Currie is, it's about 45 minutes north of Whistler, a couple hours north of Vancouver. And it's in a transition forest type, transitioning between the BC coast and interior. So we get a bit of the good from both forests and a bit of the challenges as well. I've been working for Lil'wat Forestry Ventures for 14 years, just starting my 15th year with them. And we've accomplished quite a bit in those 15 years. I guess I also wear some other hats, and I might mention those as well to you. So I am currently the vice president of the TLA, the Truck Loggers Association, that represents basically the blue collar forestry worker. Puts their boots on every day and goes to work and helps keep the forest industry going in the woods. And in addition, I'm a strategic advisor for the First Nations Forestry Council and help them with some of their policy decisions, just because of we definitely have a lot of experience dealing with forest policies working for Lil'wat Forestry. When I started with Lil'wat Forestry Ventures, we basically had no harvesting activities and no employees. It was just a couple of us starting, but we've built it into quite a industry. Currently, Lil'wat Forestry Ventures employs close to 50 staff. And as we speak, we have 32 out fighting fires, and the remainder of the staff doing fuel management work around Whistler. So we are quite busy, and a lot of our training and work is related to fires, whether we're helping stop catastrophic wildfires, helping prevent them, burn down communities, or in other cases, actually lighting them. So, and I'll explain a little bit about that as well. So, the other side of Lil'wat Forestry Ventures, besides our contracting division, is our forest harvesting, and we do manage quite a few different forest tenures. Forest granted by provincial and federal governments for Lil'wat to manage and harvest in. Some of those licenses, for those of you that know different types of forest licenses, we have a First Nations woodland license, a purchase forest license, a couple woodlots that we manage, and as well as manage harvesting on reserve. The Lil'wat Nation is also involved in two community forests, both the Cheakamus, with the resort municipality of Whistler, and Squamish Nation, and then they also have the Shpilkuna Community Forest, which is a partnership with the village of Pemberton. So Lil'wat Forestry Ventures is very vested in forestry, and as mentioned, it creates a lot of employment for Lil'wat Nation members. Of our 50 staff, I would say 40 to 45 are from Lil'wat or Nakwakwa, our neighboring nation. So it does provide high-paying jobs for community members, and has really helped change the community in a better way. We work closely with the Salish unit crew, so BC Wildfire. And when some of their staff get too old or can't pass their fitness tests, we're lucky enough to have them come and work for us. So we have lots of firefighters that have over 25, 30 years of experience working for Lil'wat Forestry Ventures. And that really helps us to direct some of the forestry activities that we've started to incorporate. And I guess, now I'll explain some of the things that Lil'wat Forestry Ventures has or is doing differently that kind of probably is one of the reasons that I'm here today. So in the past 20 years, we've seen a huge change in the forests. As I said, we're a transition forest type, affected by and getting affected quite a bit by climate change. We've seen fires that are unprecedented, and these fires have really changed our thinking about forest management. In the past, 30 years ago, the Lil'wat Nation worked hard in the Sea to Sky LRMP, and they protected huge areas of forest in conservancies, and other cultural and for other cultural values. But unfortunately, like I said, in the past 20 years, we've seen approximately 10% of the forest. So we in Lil'wat, we have about 280,000 hectares of forested land in the traditional territory, and of that, we've seen close to 20,000 hectares of wildfire. And that wildfire is not the good kind of fire that we might want to see. That wildfire is in August or July, as it is happening right now, and we're losing really important areas, both to the nation and as we speak, there's fires that are this afternoon within 100 meters of people's houses. So it has gotten to a point where our current forest management activities of just protecting areas are not keeping those forests safe. We did see little bits of forest thinning, fuels management happening around the resort municipality of Whistler. And we even tried some of that around Lil'wat. But in the past 3 years, we've done significant fuel thinning projects around the community on reserve. That fuel thinning, probably close to 250 hectares now, has been funded through the value of the trees. So we aren't doing things traditionally. We are removing trees, thinning out the forest, leaving a forest behind, and still being able to do it and pay for it through the value of the trees we're removing. These thin forests, though, aren't only providing a reduction in fire hazard, but we've been able to do cultural burning in them as well. And that cultural burning is allowing us to not only further reduce fire hazard, but the cultural burning is also bringing back plants that are important to the Lil'wat Nation. The Lil'wat Nation has done significant studies and looked into records written by elders, and a lot of those a lot of those writings talked about a forest type that's not like the forest we see today. The forests of the past were a lot more open. There was a lot more grassland actually that are now forested areas, and some of the stories we hear, like the elders could see deer walking through the forest and coming down, and that's how they knew it was hunting season. The forests today are so thick you can barely see into them, let alone see through them enough to see deer walking down. So we are really noticing changes to the forest type. And in addition, there's elder stories that when the forest got too thick, they would burn them at the right time of year and bring back the foods and medicines that they really needed. So we've been able to incorporate this cultural burning and thinning around the community, and it's this year we're proud to say we did three fairly large cultural burns, and one was quite close to the community, within probably 100 meters, 200 meters of people's houses. And that cultural burn, like I said, not only brings back the plants, but it does lower the fire risk to the community. So we're pretty proud of that. And it's happening because as we speak, there was a huge fire. There's actually been two fires near Pemberton. One was right close to the village of Pemberton. People could see it from their backyards. That one is being contained now and got significant amounts of air support to help put it out, both planes and helicopters, and now we have ground crews on them. And now, in addition, we have a second fire that's about 2,700 hectares. It burned a conservancy that the nation worked hard to protect, and it's also burnt a valley next to it that we relied on for basically timber harvesting and managing. So, and now it's moved down lower, basically into the backyards of people's houses, and as we spoke today, was within 100 meters of people's houses. Those people had asked us to thin the forests above them, but we weren't able to do it because of current forest policies that we were challenged with. Those areas were within spotted owl habitat, and there was no harvesting allowed. And just so you guys are aware, today we did speak with spotted owl biologists, and we've been working with them actually for the past year, looking at ways to do thinning in spotted owl habitat, help reduce wildfire risk, and to help enhance the spotted owl habitat, because they've admitted that a lot of these thick forests that are considered spotted owl habitat actually aren't very good spotted owl habitat. In addition, we found the same with our old growth. We did an old growth study that the province helped fund through REDIP, and through that study, we also found the same thing with a lot of the old growth management and OGDA areas, that through enhancement, we could actually lower the fire risk to a lot of these areas, and we could actually make it so those trees that are currently kind of stunted in size could grow, and we could see greater old growth attributes that the nation would also benefit from by having these more open forests that traditional plants could grow in, that they are currently lacking at the moment. And probably the last thing to mention out of that is that as we change our management techniques and we're not managing solely for saw logs in the forest anymore, we are seeing different types of trees coming out of these forests. And it does make me a little bit concerned about homes for those trees. The trees that we're thinning are often smaller, and these smaller trees, are currently going to pulp mills and to places like that. And as we see pulp mills close, it does make me a little bit concerned, because in other countries, they're able to utilize those smaller logs for biomass, for instance, to create energy. And we see it in European countries, for instance, that they're able to do this thinning and find homes for it. And we really would like to see an opportunity to do more of this thinning, but we do need to make sure that we have homes for all the logs we remove. When they're larger Douglas fir, we're able to ship them off to a local peeler mill like Richmond Plywood or Coastland, and keep them local in BC, and provide those jobs and the forest products we need for houses. But some of these smaller products, whether they're pulp or energy type logs. It would be really great to ensure we have markets for them because it's key to our forest industry. There's a lot of forests that could really use a lot of this ecosystem enhancement work that we're doing, and we have a very highly skilled forest industry, um, and I think there's some good opportunities for some of this thinning to enhance the forest that we leave behind, and some of them, yeah, we may go back and harvest multiple times, but other forests we may just go in and thin just for ecosystem restoration and fire protection. So yeah, looking forward to some questions from everyone, and I'll pass it back to Stuart and then let Laurie speak. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Clay. That was great. We'll get to the questions in the Q&A period. And for now, we would just like to hear from Lori. The floor is yours, Lori.
Thanks, Stuart. It's such a pleasure to be here with Minister Parmar and with Clay and and have the opportunity to talk with all of you tonight and answer some questions. My name is Lori Daniels. I'm the co-director of the Center for Wildfire Coexistence at the University of British Columbia. But today I'm coming to you from Calgary. I am on the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, of the Stoney Nakoda people, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. So this is Treaty 7 and Métis Districts 5 and 6 territory. As I was driving across from Vancouver to Calgary, today I was passing through wave upon wave of smoke, and it made me think, really, what do I want to speak to you about today, and what do I want to share with you? And what I really want to reflect on is what we call the triple fire paradox. So I want to tell you a story about the research that I've done over my career that helps me to understand the fires that we're seeing today, and then also gives me hope as to where we can go into the future. So I wanted to start with a little bit of a question before I go any further. Down on your Zoom bar, there's a place where it says react. And so you can react by sending up a little emoji. And I want to, if you have done this, I'm going to have you send up an emoji. So my question for you is, have you ever stopped and counted the rings on the stump of a tree or on a disc that has been cut from a tree? And I'm seeing thumbs up and hearts and celebrations all over the place. So welcome to the world of dendrochronology. You are now honorary tree ring nerds for the evening. Over my career, I've spent 30 years using tree rings to try to understand the fire history, the ecology of our ecosystems, and how our ecosystems function all around British Columbia. Tonight, I want to focus on the southern interior and the dry forest types. And I want to differentiate that specifically because how our dry forests in the southern interior of the province function and how we can conserve and restore and manage for them is slightly different than the coastal or the interior rainforest or the subboreal and boreal forests. So I want to also focus on that southern interior because that's where we're also seeing so much fire right now. So I want to take you back 31 years ago last week when I was doing my first fire history, and I sampled the disc that you can see behind me. There I was in the Caribou, very young, learning how to do tree ring studies, and we sampled this disc to determine the age of that tree, but also to use it to try to understand fire history. So let's see if I can shift my chair. Normally, when we have a big disc like this, you would find the pith or the center of the tree right in the middle, and you can count from the pith out to determine how old the tree is. You might notice that the pith on this one is way down at the bottom instead of in the geographic center. Well, that tree started to grow in 1809, and when it was just about 30 years old, in 1837, it was burned by a surface fire that damaged part but not all of the tree, and it survived. But the rings no longer formed concentric circles, they now formed arcs. And it burned again a second time. I'll see if I can shift just a little bit more so that you can see just to the side of my face there is the 1837 scar, and then the 1858 scar is over on the other side of the center of the tree. So this tree survived 2 fires in its lifetime, low intensity surface fires that damaged but did not kill the tree. And so embedded in its tree rings are not only its age, but the history of the fires in the forest, the years that were droughty when it formed a narrow ring, and even years when there might have been insects that ate the needles and left it suppressed for multiple years in a row. In my research team, we have traveled all over the southern interior of BC over the last 25 years, collecting fire scar discs like this from stumps and logs, sometimes from living trees or snags where we can take partial sections and leave them standing, but still record the tree ring history from them. And compiling all of those fire scars from all over the dry forest, the Caribou, the Okanagan, the West and East Kootenays, all up through our Rocky Mountain National Parks, we've discovered that fires used to be really common, much more common in British Columbia than they are today. Abundant surface fires used to burn in valley bottoms 5 to 15 years between one fire and the next. As you move up the mountain slopes, it'd be one fire every 15 to 40 or 50 years. And even up into some of the dry subalpine forests, you could still get a fire scar forming once a century. Other forests that were wetter would have had longer time periods from one fire to the next. The one factor that all of these fire records have in common is somewhere between the late 1800s and the early 1900s, the fire scars stopped forming. We changed the fire regime. And in the Western scientists, we've seen this pattern all through Western North America and down into South America, and also in places around the world where we've been able to reconstruct fire histories, places like New Zealand and parts of Australia as well. All of these places have in common the arrival of European settlers in Western North America about the time that the fire scars stopped. We began to change the way that we managed the land. We began to shift to the kinds of vegetation, introducing cattle, introducing timber management. And of course, European cultures were afraid of fire and saw it as negative. And so we've developed tremendous expertise to detect and suppress fires. And so the fire scars stopped. The consequence, or one of the challenges that arise from that, is that when the surface fires stopped, we see in those forests, also we can see from the tree rings, trees began to establish and began to persist and grow. So our grasslands became infilled with trees, the woodlands became dense forests, the dense forests became even denser forests. And in many of the forests that we work in, when we look at the age of the trees in the forest relative to when the scars stopped, we see that 60 to 80% of the trees in the forest began to grow when the surface fires ended. And so it means that today's forests, in many places where surface fire was such an important part of the ecosystem, are now 2 to 3 times denser. They have 2 to 3 times more trees than they would have had in the 17 and 1800s when those fire scars were forming. When you add all that fuel, and when we have trees now that are small size, intermediate size, large size, they are contagious. We have fires now that spread horizontally through the forest from one location to the next, and vertically from the surface up into the crowns of trees where they do much more damage and are much harder to control. And so there's the fire suppression paradox, part one of my 3-part story. By trying to put out fires, thinking we were protecting the forest, we've actually altered these dry forest systems so that they have many more trees in them today. And in particular, those small trees that Klay already referred to that are difficult to manage and find products, wood products, or other factors to consider. And so for management. So now with all these extra trees in the forest, we're seeing a shift in the types of fire that we're experiencing. No longer do we have surface fires, but we have the high intensity fires impacting us. So part two of the story, what do we do? Well, we took away fire and it caused the problem. So can we add fire back into the system to restore the system in that process? Of course, the problem is now if we add fire in the current condition, we have too many trees and too much fuel. So the fires, even if we tried to do prescribed burns in many of those forests, would be too intense. So this leads us to the point where we need to think about how do we restore the structure and composition of those forests to reduce the amount of fuels, and in particular the small trees leaving the large trees behind. The big trees, the fire-scarred trees, the ones that have the hundreds of years of forest history embedded in them, Can we leave them behind, but remove by thinning from below and using innovative silviculture, remove all those understory trees that came in absence of surface fire? So that's thinning from below. That's innovative silviculture. It's a form of ecological restoration in many ecosystems, and it certainly fuels mitigation, especially when we also clean up the understory fuels. Once we've done that first step, now we can reintroduce fire, prescribed fire, or indigenous-led cultural burning to maintain those forests and also to maintain the lower fuel loads. Now, part 3 of my story I've already hinted at by referring to the indigenous cultural fire, because I've given you lots of reasons. If we go back and think about those fire scar records and how they changed, we knew that Europeans arrived and they changed the way the landscape was managed. We started putting out fires. We also know that in the mid part of the 20th century, there was a wetter, cooler, wetter period. All of that helped to reduce the amount of fire on the landscape. But as our team was doing these fire scar records and reconstructions, we began to realize that the frequency of the fires was even higher than we think could have been sustained just by lightning. And so it was there that we began to collaborate and learn from Indigenous people around British Columbia, who've shared with us their knowledge about Indigenous fire stewardship and some of the cultural burning practices that Klay has already spoken about. The use of fire to cultivate food plants and habitat for herbivores and for wildlife that were important food sources, using fire to cultivate medicines and ceremonial plants, and the use of fire as part of ceremony and a reciprocal give and take with the land. So all of these are cultural practices and oral histories that European culture unfortunately did not listen to and learn from for the last century. And so part 3 of the fire paradox is that it's only by learning from Indigenous people will we fully understand the historical fire regimes and meet our potential in terms of restoring these ecosystems and sustaining the biodiversity that we all value. And so it worries me when I see these fires today impacting vast areas in our dry forests, burning old growth forests, impacting habitats, and losing cultural values and resources across our land. As we realized about a decade ago the importance of that cultural fire component, our research team shifted our focus and we collaborate now with Indigenous nations around BC. So to bring this conversation full circle, we're really proud and really privileged to get to work with Klay and Lil'wat Forestry Ventures and members of the Lil'wat Nation who have been teaching us about fire, and to have research students, graduate students, and postdoctoral researchers, and our undergraduate research assistants, and local community members, youth from the community, also be part of our research teams so that we can learn together and to help to understand the historical fires on Lil'wat territory, to use that knowledge in combination with the knowledge from elders and knowledge holders so that we can co-develop projects for monitoring the outcomes for those cultural burns that are being revitalized on the landscape, and that we can help guide ecological restoration and fuels mitigation for the safety of all of the members of the communities, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, up and down the Sea to Sky Highway, and as we transition from that coastal zone into the interior forests. So I'm going to leave it there, and I look forward to your questions, but I also want to pause and go back to that very first disc, the picture behind me. That was the first 9 plots that I did in my career studying fire history. Site 9, Site 8, Site 7, and Site 6 have all burned this week, just outside Clinton. And it really speaks to me very loudly right now how much fires have changed and how much hard work is ahead of us to recreate the resilience in our ecosystems and be better prepared and adapted for climate change. So again, thank you for having me here today.
Great. Thanks so much, Lori. I was just we're gonna just pass it over to Ravi, and the floor is yours, sir.
Great. Thanks very much, Stuart. Hopefully folks can hear me loud and clear. My name is Ravi Parmar. I have the honor to serve as the MLA for Langford Highlands, which is the background behind me. Maybe not as cool as Laurie's very cool background, but I think Langford is pretty cool too. And I'm dialing in from the territories of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations, Coast Salish territories this evening. Without a doubt, just given the conversation to date, I also want to begin by acknowledging, in addition to being the MLA for Langford Highlands, I'm British Columbia's Minister of Forests and the Minister responsible for the BC Wildfire Service. And my thoughts go out to all British Columbians that are facing the impacts of wildfire smoke, as well as are under evacuation order and alert. Just seeing some of the comments in the chat, I think from some folks in Kelowna and the Okanagan and parts of the interior, you're certainly being impacted by that, and I hope you're doing well and staying safe as well. And my thoughts go out, especially having spoken to many community leaders in Clinton, British Columbia, 70 Mile House, and through the Fraser Canyon just this evening as well. I'll keep my comments fairly brief, but first want to thank Stuart, who is an incredible volunteer in my constituency of Langford Highlands, for his leadership and that of the leadership of SCOEE. It's a real honor for me to be able to get the opportunity to listen to two dear friends, and Klay and Laurie, two people I hold in very high regard, and certainly are expertise in their own rights, who I rely on to be able to provide me advice and guidance in my role as BC's Minister of Forests. I think if there's one thing that I've greatly appreciated in my time as the Minister of Forests over the course of the last year and 9 months is that our forests here in British Columbia are one of the greatest gifts that we've been given. They provide good paying, family supporting jobs. They support communities in every corner of this province. They protect the watersheds that supply our drinking water, that sustain wildlife, biodiversity, and I think they are deeply connected to the cultural and identity of who we are as British Columbia. And I think if there's one thing that I've tried to appreciate in my role as Minister of Forests is we can't choose one of those values over another. Our responsibility and my responsibility to all of you and to all British Columbians is to protect all of them. And to strike that balance. And that's why I always have appreciated the role of SCOEE in rejecting the idea that we have to choose between a healthy environment and a strong economy. The truth is, and you all know, that one depends on the other. And that's why today that balance matters more than ever, especially as we see the challenges that our forest sector is facing with the significant headwinds of unfair U.S. tariffs and duties from Donald Trump, global market uncertainty, and just as many communities are facing challenges with wildfires, I know that there's many communities facing challenges with job losses that have created a real anxiety for workers as well, and contractors and communities that Klay certainly represents with the Truck Loggers Association that have built their lives around forestry. Those challenges demand action, but our response, I know, given the conversation this evening, can't be to abandon the values that make British Columbia unique. Our response to building a forest sector that is stronger, more competitive, more resilient, has to also include protecting our forests that make this province extraordinary. It's why one of the priorities that I've given to my ministry is to ensure that we're protecting our watershed, biodiversity, and wildlife by ensuring that conservation, habitat restoration, and responsible stewardship are at the core of how we manage our forests. And I know that this is something that is top of mind in many communities where I have this conversation with at a local government level, First Nations, and other types of organizations as well. I think it's very clear that forestry is a strategic economic asset for our country, but it's also what makes me proud to be a British Columbian, especially one living in southern Vancouver Island. And so I'm a big believer that we can work together to realize our full potential for the next generation. And that has to ensure that we leave them forests that are healthy, resilient, and able to sustain the opportunities that are before us for the decades to come. So I want to thank you for the invitation. I'm sure, given some of the names that I see on here, there's lots of questions and engagement. I'm certainly looking forward to the opportunity to hear Klay and Laurie provide their perspectives on forest policy and where we are in terms of the challenges that the forest sector faces, but also wildfire and all of the things that are facing our land base here as well. So, Stuart, thanks very much for the invitation.
Great. Thanks so much, Ravi. It's great to have you through, and so you can hear these experts and the questions we're about to ask. Um, so keep asking the questions in the chat, and we do have some time, so it'll be good. The first question for Clay, from Suzanne. Can you explain the difference between thinning and selective harvesting?
Uh, Again, it really for us depends on what the outcome that we're trying to achieve. Selective harvesting is definitely a method of thinning the forest. Um, we do when we do our work, it's we're leaving different numbers of trees behind and leaving them behind for different values depending on the location. So, like as I mentioned, if it's if it's right near a community, we might be leaving more and bigger trees behind. As you know, but as we have different, as we're thinning out forests in different areas, we may only leave, and I'll give you just numbers like 200 stems a hectare all the way down to 50. And those areas of 50 stems per hectare we're leaving behind, those areas are thinned for different reasons. So we're thinning them out to burn, and in this case, we're trying to bring back specific berries that are they're called hosham. They're soapberry or supalali, and the Lil'wat Nation is traveling basically sometimes 100 to 150 kilometers to pick them. But our manager of community and culture, Jordan Gabriel, remembers them in these areas growing up. So when the forests were more open or thinner, those types of berries grew naturally in the forest around Lil'wat. But because of the density issues that Laurie spoke about, we're not seeing them anymore. So to really answer the question, thinning, selective harvesting, again, it's you can use them somewhat interchangeably. Intermediate cut, some people call it as well, because you are leaving trees behind. But the values that you get by doing this, sometimes with the selective harvesting, you may just be thinning out the forests to let the ones that you're leaving behind grow faster, better, bigger, to harvest them in the future. Where other areas you might be thinning to lower fire hazard, other areas you might be thinning to enhance wildlife habitat, and other areas you might be thinning to bring back old growth attributes. So yeah, you're doing it for different reasons, and that's kind of part of the professional forestry and foresters decisions, but it's also for us really incorporated with our biologists that we work closely with, and with our and with the Lil'wat Nation members, and like I said, specifically Jordan Gabriel and our other cultural experts. So
Great. Thanks, Clay. And for Lori, from Lori Goldman on the unceded lands of the Silex Okanagan people in Penticton, could you please speak to the managed community forests in BC that are having success?
Yeah, thank you. What a great question. We collaborate in our research group with community forests all across the province. So the BC Community Forest Association has a network of community forests literally in every forest type around BC. We currently have a project that is in collaboration with communities and community forests all over BC. About half of them, I think there's I'm going to forget the number off the top of my head, but about half of the community forests around the province are managed or co-managed by Indigenous First Nations, local nations, others by local municipalities. There's 50 to 60. I think 62 was the number I'm remembering, but I'm not sure if I've got that 100% correct. So the community forests are area-based tenures associated with or affiliated with a community, and these joint management between municipalities and often First Nations. And because they're long-term tenures and area-based tenures, they're often practicing long-term stewardship, and they've shown tremendous leadership over the last 20 years, 15 to 20 years, in terms of innovations and demonstrating how fuels mitigation can be conducted very successfully. And so many of the community forests are among the first to have done the work to try out different types of fuels mitigation techniques around the province. I currently have a project funded by Natural Resources Canada, a funding opportunity that came forward about a year and a half ago. We're working with 40 communities around the province. We have every university in British Columbia involved. We've had 10 field teams out working across the province this summer, and we'll have data between last summer and this summer and previous work we've done. We'll have worked with over 40 of those community forests, collecting data where they've thinned the forest in the wildland urban interface adjacent to their communities, where they've been thinning the forest and mitigating the surface fuels. We're working with them to measure those forests in the treated and untreated areas, and then run computer models to say what type of forest or what type of fire would burn in those forests under hot, dry, windy conditions. And what we're finding in many of them, the computer models are telling us that when you thin out the forest and reduce the fuels, in most of those ecosystem types, we're actually seeing the potential for lower, reduced fire intensity, reduced chance of crown fire. Where fires have actually burned into some of those community forests, Logan Lake in 2021, and Logan Lake Community Forest is burning as I drove past it this morning. Again, as of yesterday, Clinton Community Forest, West Bank First Nation Community Forest, Sifco in the Slocan Valley. Each of these community forests have had fire burn into some of their treatments. We're able to go back and measure and then determine, did the treatment actually help reduce the fire intensity and reduce the fire effects? And we're finding that there are very positive effects. And it depends a little bit on how extreme the fire weather is. And then also helping to use that information, post-fire information, to tell us about how frequently we need to maintain the treatments and what are some of the things we might do to improve future treatments. So making it truly adaptive management to benefit as many communities as possible.
Great. Thanks so much, Lori. And for Clay, from Anita in the Lekwungen speaking territory in Victoria, could you just expand and talk further about traditional cultural burns?
Yeah, of course. Happy to speak a little bit more about it. Probably the thing to relate is that we're definitely not doing anything that's new, right? Lil'wat has probably been burning it through time immemorial, and they've been using it to manage their forests. As I mentioned through Jordan's research, he's looked at writings from elders and the fact that they've been lighting fires to manage the forest for wildlife and for food, as long as they can remember. These cultural burns that we're doing, as Lori mentioned, though, we can't just go and light. Generally, we do have to remove carbon, so trees from the forest to lower the fire risks. We've been able to do it in a multitude of different forest types. Generally, we're looking at, sometimes we're moving all the trees, sometimes we're moving half the trees. But again, it really depends on the ecosystem and the result we're looking for. In addition, we work closely with BC Wildfire to make sure that when we put fire back onto the land, that it is managed and it doesn't get away. We will be lighting in the spring and in the fall, kind of when the top materials are dry enough, but there's sometimes still a little bit of moisture in the ground and moisture in the trees, so we don't see ground fires and so on. It's done through a burn plan that's initially made in collaboration, like I said, with Jordan and the other cultural specialists, to really have the fire intensities that we're looking for to achieve the plant communities that we're looking to bring back. And then in addition, we as Lori mentioned, we are working with her team to collect data after the fires, to measure fire intensities even in our cultural burns, to see what happens with different fire intensities and what plants are coming back. So we are really mixing kind of Western science with cultural knowledge, and then blending it again with the new practices of using drip torches, putting in sprinkler systems, even flying the areas with a drone so we can see if fire jumps the guards and goes in. There's infrared drones that tell us if the fire's getting away, so we don't have to send firefighters into the smoke to breathe the smoke. So it's quite a lot more technical than you can imagine. And although it does seem kind of crazy and scary at the time that we're lighting fires to the intensity we are, it does make a big difference. I just probably would like to mention too that we do have, if people are interested in seeing some of the cultural burns that we've done, there is some on places like YouTube, showing some of the cultural burns that we've done, on Lil'wat for the Lil'wat Business Group website. We have some as well. And we did, anyone on social media, we did actually collaborate with BC Bob. He came out and videoed some of our cultural burns. And from what I've heard, we've had over 500,000 views on some of them. So we are really trying to educate the public on what a cultural burn is, to, again, try to bring that fear away from people, because we know that fire is a scary thing, and with people losing their homes and what's happened in communities and even places like Jasper, right? It can be terrifying to think that we're putting fire back out into the forest. But if you're watching these videos, you see it's very controlled. It's very much based on science, and it makes tremendous impacts to lower the fire risk to the communities, as well as to bring back those plants.
Great. Thanks so much, Clay. And for Lori from Jeanette, thank you for joining us this evening and for the very informative interview you gave on CBC The Current on Wednesday morning. Could you please explain more about the role played by deciduous trees and shiny green-leaved plants like salal and Oregon grape in mitigating the rapid spread of forest fires? And why are they more fire resistant?
Yeah, broadleaf plants are amazing and have a different morphology and a different relationship with water in terms of the shapes of their leaves and how much moisture they hold in their tissues. And that makes them more resilient, more resistant to fire. So broadleaf trees, the trees in BC that help us, that are an important component of the ecosystem, would be our aspens and birches. We've seen broadleaf trees commonly around riparian zones, streamside ecosystems, and adjacent to water bodies. They need more water to be to sustain them and to grow those trees. But they also create a slightly different microenvironment, so that when their leaves are out, they create shady understories that have cooler temperatures and higher humidities than the adjacent needle-leaf forest. So having broadleaf trees mixed in, or have just patches of broadleaf or deciduous trees in our landscape, help to create landscape resilience. And we're learning that lesson right now the hard way across BC. Our timber management, much of our forest management has really focused on the conifers, and those were decisions and policies made, post Second World War, when we made choices in British Columbia to manage our forest for economic gain, and made choices about the timber harvesting land base. And we're learning now, in an era of climate change and where we've had cumulative effects on the landscape, that some of those choices that we thought were the right choices at the time are having unintended consequences, a bit like the fire suppression paradox. So getting deciduous trees back onto the landscape, and we see changes in some of our forest policy and regulations to allow a higher component of broadleaf trees to have, the early successional stages that allow those broadleaf trees to come back in, is really helpful. The question about the understory plants, the salals and the Oregon grape on the coast, many of our berry-producing shrubs in the interior. Clay has already referred to hoisham or supalele. Those are understory shrub plants and other plants that grow in the understory, that need enough light that they can grow and thrive in the understory of our forests. But having those broadleaf plants also help to create shade and protect the soil and keep the soil moist, which in years like this, where we have such extreme drought, become very important. And having that healthy understory plant layer is also really critical for the long-term sustainability of the ecosystem. Having it recycling nutrients, have it creating microenvironments, and creating habitat for a whole bunch of plants and animals, the flora and fauna within the forest. So it really plays multiple roles and can both benefit from and reduce the risk of catastrophic fire when we have the right mix of broadleaf deciduous plants as well as our conifers on the landscape.
Great. Thanks so much, Lori. And this one's for Clay from Judy in Peachland. What sort of forest ecosystem mitigation are you doing? Oh, you're still muted.
Oh, sorry, can you repeat that?
Clay. Um, what sort of forest ecosystem mitigation are you doing?
So it's more forest ecosystem rehabilitation. So what we're trying to do is recreate a lot of those ecosystems that we would have had you know over 100 years ago. So as Lori said before, all the fire prevention or the fire mitigation or fire the firefighting was the main way of managing forests, and the main forestry activities were harvesting and filling the forest back up with as many trees as possible. So we're looking at doing the thinning work as mentioned, looking at more innovative of silviculture practices. So we've, as kind of mentioned, including more broadleaf trees in some of our forests. So where we were focused completely on deciduous, now we're allowing for broadleaf. We're actually starting a native plant nursery to start growing some of those native plants that are really important to the nation, and putting those back in. And we've been lucky enough to have a lot of help from UBC with some of this work. So being able to combine, like I said, that information that Jordan and others have gathered, but also being able to do and work with Dr. Tony Smith, who worked with Jordan and the elders to see what plants are really important to the community, and for food sovereignty. So working with her and others. Again, looking at another UBC research project was on pine mushrooms as well. So how we can manage the forest to help, better maintain pine mushrooms that the community relies on for picking for food. And then, as I said, working with biologists as well, whether it's ungulate and deer biologists, whether it's spotted owl biologists. Like I said, we had a couple hour meeting today with a spotted owl biologist to see how we can better manage the forest to help increase the amount of good habitat for spotted owls, and working with old growth experts as well to try to increase the value of the old growth stands that are out there, because unmanaged, basically they're not providing those values, and a lot of them are at really high fire risk. And so trying to do innovative practices to keep those really important values on the landscape. So if it's a cultural value, how can we thin around it to prevent it from burning down? Or similarly, how can we thin on a spotted owl habitat, so if the fires do come, maybe we can slow them down or put them out, and protect that really important spotted owl habitat before we might lose it in a catastrophic wildfire.
Great. Thanks so much, Clay. It's inspiring to hear the mindset change from mitigate to rehabilitate. So that's great. Um, so I'm going to ask one more question for both experts, and they can both respond, and then we'll close after that. But I would really like to thank you all for being here, especially the experts and the elected officials. It's been inspiring for me. It was quick, and hopefully we learned a lot, and we will be doing this again. Um, so I'm really hopeful that once we close, if you can go back and hit the donate button and try and send SCOEE $5 or $10. We're gonna try and line up Fentanyl Hall next with Jody Osborne. So to keep this series running. As you noticed, I had to do the land acknowledgement myself because SCOEE can't afford an honorarium. So hopefully you guys don't mind throwing $5 into the pot, and we will continue these series for you. And so for both experts, and we'll just ask Clay to respond first, and then Lori. Um, so for both, from Anita, from Victoria, Lekwungen speaking territory, what would it take to accelerate the fire resilience of our forests? Is it people? Is it more people, more skills, or more money? And that's for you, Clay.
That's a great question. I don't think the skills or the people are the challenge. Again, I think, as both Laurie and I mentioned, if we're wanting to do this thinning work, a lot of it is based on economics, and we could expect the province to pay for it all, but to me that doesn't seem like it's you know it doesn't make sense, right? We need to find ways of doing it to break even, or to make a small profit. And in order to do that, we're going to need to kind of think outside the box, um, think of different ways of doing the work, possibly doing it in bigger areas, doing it in collaboration with communities, so they support the work, and rather than fear it. We had to do a lot of public engagement to allow us to do the thinning behind the community in Mount Currie, and then to do the cultural burning. Right, it takes a lot of extra effort, but once you can get the community on board, and understand that you're doing it to protect them, when the fires come like they are now, we get applauded for the work that we've done to help keep that community safe. So no, I don't think it's a person problem, and I don't think it's an equipment or anything like that. I think it's just, it has to be financially viable, and we need locations for a lot of that small fiber to go. And I think if we're able to do that and make it economic, then yeah, I could see a lot more people doing it.
Great, thanks, Clay. And would you like me to re-ask the question, Lori? Or it's just
No, it's
okay.
okay. It's a great question, and I'm going to say we need an all of society approach. I've dropped into the chat. I'm sorry to do this to everybody because it's a scientific paper, but it's free. It's in the Canadian Journal of Fire or Forest Research. After the big fires in 2023, my research team and our collaborators from across BC and I put our heads together and tried to summarize what we thought were the drivers of the record-breaking fires that we had in 2023, and think about the broad suite of things that we could be working towards, the truly, how do we make the transformative changes? And so we've summarized many of the ideas there, and it really comes down to that all of society approach, understanding how complex fire is and thinking about ways in which we can be sometimes thinking outside the box on these solutions. We definitely know that the shift is underway, thinking about how do we transition our forest management towards resilience to future climates? How do we maintain opportunities for citizens across the province? How do we maintain biodiversity at the same time? These are challenges that we're facing in the current economic and climate change impacts. Um, and I'm seeing others have really great suggestions that are popping up in the chat as well. So it really is, I think we are in an era of absolute transformation, some of it forced upon us by climate change, some of it because of the global economic scenarios that we find ourselves in today, and some of it because our values in our society are changing. And so that rapid change is underway. And so I think continuing to look for those solutions and being patient, trying to hear from one another, listen to one another's concerns, and look for solutions that all of us can get behind. These are complex problems, and remember, it's taken us over a century to create the landscapes that we see today that are burning. It will take us years and decades of hard work all together, pulling together in the same direction, to make the changes and to become adapted in the new world in which we live.
Great, thanks so much, Lori. Cooperation, and I think we got a little closer here tonight, even if we got one sentence that impacts us and moves us forward in a good direction. So I'm really, really thankful and grateful for our experts and our elected officials for coming through. You are free to leave. And thanks so much for coming through SCOE Hall. And we will invite our emeritus experts to the next ones. And we hope maybe we'll do this next year, and we can start a document and a catalog, and we can note our progress on moving from mitigation to rehabilitation. That was what I got out of this. So let's rehabilitate our forests. So thanks again for our experts and our elected officials and everyone. That'll be the end. We'll stick around for to leave the chat open and just have a debrief amongst the uh, participants. So thanks again, and I'll follow up with a thank you email for the experts and the elected official. So thanks, you guys. That will end our